Hello, and in this SAS tutorial we're going to have a look at how to insert data. Now there are two main ways of doing this in SAS. One is we can import data from another file, and the second is that we can import data or input data directly into SAS. There is some commonality between the two procedures, and first we're going to have a look at how to import data directly. So anytime we do it, we need a data to start what's called a data step, and to do that we just type data, and then we need to give the data set a name. So the first data set we're going to do is about the number of friends people have, so we're just going to call it friends. We then need to say what variables we're going to what variables there are in the data, and we do that with an input statement. This is what kind of data we're going to be inputting, and in this case I'm just going to do a 2-column data set. One column for how angry somebody is on a 10-point scale, and another column for the number of friends they have. This will be the setup we want for a correlational design, for example. We're going to put a semicolon, and now to tell SAS that we actually want to directly give it the data that we want to use from our first columns, we're going to use a command called data lines. And if we add in the data lines command, put a semicolon, and now when we type anything, you'll notice that the syntax colour has changed, because now it wants us to, we're putting in the actual data rather than any commands. So and we do it in the order of the variables. So the first thing we enter is going to be called it's going to be a person's score in anger, and the second score is going to be the number of friends. So I'm going to say the first person has an anger score of 2 and has 100 friends. The second person has an anger score of 8 and has 50 friends. The third person has an anger score of 6 and has 77 friends. And obviously you'd have way more data than that, but it's just for an example. So assuming we've entered our data, what we're going to do is on the next line we're going to put a semicolon. Now running that is going to add the data in for us, but we want to show the data, and after you've used any data procedure in SAS, you can use proc print to directly output that data to the screen, and if you don't specify what data you want with a data statement, it will just print the last inputted data. So if we put a semicolon, and if we go ahead and run that, we'll see we get our data. So we've got the amount of anger someone has and the number of friends they have. So that's how to input data directly. How do we input data from a file? Well, we use the same data procedure. The data we're going to use for this example is mood. So just to make it simple, I'm going to call it data mood. Now SAS can import data from a variety of file types. We use the same general procedure for all of them. As you can see in this list of files that I've got here, I usually input CSV files into SAS, comma separated value, a type of file where the different columns are separated by commas. So the data we're going to be looking at is called in this affect.csv file. So if we open that, we see we've got 3 columns: message, relevance, and positive affect. So we want to import those. So to do that, we first need to specify where we're getting this information from. We do that with the in-file statement, and then we put open quotation mark, and I'm going to paste the path to where that file is. Because it can interpret several different types of files, it needs to know what separates the values that are different, and we do that with the delimitator statement. Because this is so I'm going to say delimitator, delimiter, and in my case, it's a comma, because this is a comma separated value file. If you had a data set that was separated by tabs, you'd put a tab in there. Now, because we have if we go back to our file, because the first row isn't an observation, it's the names of our fields, we need to set first obs equals 2 to tell it that the first line in our file isn't a person, it's just delimiting the titles. And now we need an input statement to tell it what our variables are. So it's going to do it once again in the order that it sees them in the file. So the first column is the type of message someone received. Second column is the relevance of that message, and the third column is positive affect. So we want to import them in that order. Now brings up an important thing, because 2 of our variables are categorical variables, the message and the relevance variable. Well, how do we define that in SAS? In lots of programs, you have to create what's called a coding variable and say 1 equals happy and 2 equals dull or whatever. Because if we, for example, SPSS, if you put a string variable in directly, it wouldn't allow us to do lots of analyses. But in SAS, it just interprets the same string as a different group. So how do we do that? Well, our first variable was our message, so I'm just gonna liberate that to mcg. How do we tell it that it's not a continuous variable, it's actually a string variable? Well, after the name of the variable, we put a $sign, and that's going to tell it, I don't want you to try and interpret that as a number, I want you to try and interpret that as the world that it is. The second column was relevance, so I'm just going to say rel, and then put a $sign, because that was another categorical variable. And our third variable was positive affect. That was a continuous variable, so I'm just going to leave it as it was. And to see that data again, we can go print, and if we run that, we see that I've made a mistake somewhere. I put a extra comma in here that's not required. If we run that, it should be second time lucky. And yes, we see all of our data. So that was a quick example of how to import data into SAS. This will work for all versions of SAS. In some versions, there's actually a point and click interface to import files, and it just generates the same code as I showed you. But this works for all versions of SAS. If you just write out the code and it's not that complicated stuff. Thought I'd show you that way. Anyway, thank you for watching this video.